This lecture is dedicated to more demonstration and examples of the grid system. The grid is very flexible and powerful, and we'll see with different examples that it allows to create great responsive and dynamic layouts. So in order to follow with me, you'll need to open the file grid.html in your browser. We're going to start with the first example. You're going to find the file grid.html in the folder demo that you have downloaded earlier during this course. In your code editor, you're going to open the same folder demo, and inside this folder demo, you'll find the grid folder, in which you'll find the file grid_x1.html. So go ahead, open the file grid_x1.html in your code editor, and we'll be ready to start. So let's start now with the example number 1, single columns. As explained, the grid system uses the mobile-first approach. It is designed based on the mobile-first experience. For example, on the desktop and large screen view, we may have a layout with 1, 2, or 3 columns, but when we shrink the size of the screen, the same columns will be stacked on each other. This is the default setting, and without any style applied to the small devices, the column will have a full width. And you have to understand that the same style that we apply to the small screen will override the other screen size, meaning that any style that are applied using the class prefix call-xs will apply to small devices and higher, unless you override it by using the other classes. A quick reminder about class prefixes. So we have one for each screen size. First, for the extra small devices, like the iPhone, for example. Then for the tablet, which is call-sm. And also for the desktop and large screen view, so the two last ones. You can learn more by going on the website of the Bootstrap 3. So let's see that now in action. So we're going to look at the source code in the code editor. First, we have a div with a class of container, and this is where the div is ending. And the div with the class of container wraps divs with a class of row, which themselves include divs with columns. This is how the grid system works. And I have also added visual cues by using a div with the class of view. I am using the responsive utilities classes in order to make the content visible according to the screen size. For example, first we have the class visible-lg for the large screen, so only this content will be visible when we are on a large screen view. Then the desktop view, when we reach the breaking point of the desktop view. Then we have the tablet view, and finally the small device view. We can see how this works by viewing in the browser. So we can see that now we are on a small device view. So as soon as we increase the size of the screen, we now switch to the tablet view with the column -sm for the class prefix. And then we're going to increase again. Then we can read desktop view. And finally, the large screen view. So these visual cues will be helpers during the different demonstrations that we're going to see together. You can learn more about responsive utilities classes by going on the Bootstrap 3 website. We'll cover that more in details in the next section. We're going to start with the first line for a first demonstration. So we have a div with a class of row that includes two other divs with the class of col-xs-6 for 6 columns. So this class prefix col-xs applies to the small screen view and higher. This will override the mobile-first default setting, and this will apply to the small devices and bigger screen sizes. So let's view that in the browser. We have two divs with 6 columns each sitting next to each other, and when we reduce the size of the screen, the layout remains with two divs next to each other. They are not stacked to each other, so that overrides the default setting. We're going to make another demonstration just to prove the point. I'm going to change the class prefix call-xs to sm, and that applies to the small devices only. So we're going to go back to the browser. I'm going to save. Then going back to the browser, I'm going to reload the page and see what happens. The two divs are now stacked on each other, so we are back to the default setting, mobile first. I am reverting back to the original version, then reload the page again, and we're back to 6 columns in each div next to each other. So let's see another example on the second line. So here we have a div with a class of col-sm, and that applies to the tablet view, meaning that this style, this layout, will specifically apply to the tablet view and higher. The default setting of full width will only apply to the small devices, so let's see that in action. So now we can read that we are on a small device view with a class of col-xs, and I'm going to increase the browser until we reach the breaking point of the tablet view. Here we go. Now on the tablet view, we have two divs sitting next to each other with 6 columns each. We're going to now look at the example of a desktop view. So by looking at the third example, we have a div with a class of row that includes two other divs with a class of col-md for desktop view. So what we should see is two divs sitting next to each other with 6 columns each. Right now we are on the tablet view, meaning that the default setting is active and we have two divs stacked on each other. Our style will become active when we increase the size of the screen to the desktop view. Here we go. We now have two divs sitting next to each other with 6 columns each. On the last row, we have two divs stacked on each other. It's because the default setting for the mobile first is overridden only for the large screen view. So let's see that in the source code. So we have a row with two divs with the class of col-lg for large screen with the number 6 for 6 columns. And this class will become active only when we reach the breaking point of the large screen view. So here we are. On the large screen view, we can see that we now have two divs with 6 columns each. In the source code, by changing the class from LG to XS, we're going to see that the default setting will be overridden from the large screen view to the small device view. Now we're going to see that the same layout will remain from the large screen view to the small device view, even by shrinking the size of the screen. So we're going to scroll down a bit just to show. So the same layout remains, because we've applied a style that applies to the small devices and higher. We're going to go back and revert to the original version by applying the class of col-lg for the large screen view. And now by looking at the browser, we're going to reload the page, and then we're back to full width, the default setting, with two divs stacked on each other. If you now understand better the concept, you will learn that you can also apply different styles to different screen sizes by using several classes. And this is what we're going to learn next in the example number 2, dynamic columns.